Hey, Doug Hamilton here, Digital Sculptor at Privateer Press. I am here to answer some common questions about digital sculpting. Come on. Models come in so many different pieces because you want to get the highest quality that you can on each piece. So by cutting it into certain parts, that allows you to print for better detail. It also allows the casting to be done where they can capture better detail. I don't mind a couple of extra pieces if it means I have a higher quality model or a more dynamic pose or a better quality because of the way the casting process is done. It often surprises people. I start with primitive shapes. I start with a sphere, a cylinder, or a cube. And literally every piece that I make, I grab from one of those primitives. I'll duplicate it, move it over to where I want it, and start sculpting it. So it might be a pouch, it might be a piece of armor, it might be a helmet, it might be a wing. It all starts from one of those primitive shapes. So things that I would keep handy, besides my normal palette of sphere, cylinder, cube, I try to keep things like generic faces, generic torso, generic leg, generic arm. It's literally just a generic arm because I'm going to go back in, I'm going to sculpt the musculature into it, or I'm going to put armor over it for that specific concept. When I first started out, I always thought, well, I want to be the artist type where I'm going to resculpt it every time for every model. And that's just crazy. Why would you resculpt the same arm again when you already have a platform to build on? So I keep a library of resources that if I need an arm, I go in and grab it. It at least gives me a quick start point. It's kind of a trick question because there's no real space in 3D. There's no measuring in 3D space that I use. But it does come down to what can a 3D printer read? Can I put more detail on a larger model? Yes, absolutely I can. So that would take more time. But can I put finer detail on it? No. You can still only read, the 3D printers can only read so much. So there's more that goes into a larger model, so it may take longer. It really varies by the model. Oh, my visual references. What do I use? I have folders and folders of reference. Anytime I see something I like that just inspires me in any way, architecture, it could be ruins from an ancient civilization. It could be a muscular male or female. It could be a normal male or female. It could be an animal. I'm working on a horse right now. So I have reference of horses that I've grabbed over the years that just work because it would look good as a model, in my opinion, the way the muscle is or the way the pose is, things like that. So it could be as simple as I'm at the zoo or I'm out somewhere and I see a structure. Or I literally grab reference from anywhere. If you've ever seen the old videos like on a spy movie where they're trying to identify someone through a fuzzy picture and the computer's going over it over and over and it gets a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better, that's exactly how I work. Is I'll go over the whole model, I'll have it roughed in, then I go over it again and it gets a little more defined, then I go over it again and it gets even more defined, and then one day it's just done. There's a lot of times where I can roughen the shape of a model and I know then just by how it feels that it's going to be a good sculpt. There's other ones where I'm like, this is going to be a struggle. In my head, I'll have certain areas that I know exactly how I'm going to do it. So I'll work on those areas. And I might go back and forth to some of the areas that I'm not so sure on, do a little bit, go back to a different area. You can feel early on if it's going to be a good model or not. And if it's not, then you have to try to decide what needs to be done to change that. There's not a ton of artistic freedom. We have a defined look to what we do, and a lot of that has to be followed. Now, there are instances where I will present ideas that I think are better and might work better to sculpt, and there are times where those ideas are approved, and there are times where those ideas are shot down. One of the earliest things you want to get over as an artist working for a studio is that despite you being an artist, maybe a great artist, the studio defines what they need, and there's a reason for it. It can be a little bit of a blow to your ego if you want to do it one way and they don't, but it's part of the job is following the instruction, and that also makes you a good artist, being able to follow that instruction and take that criticism. And the end result is that we want the best products we can. What makes the difference in a render and into the model? Because the render might look like it has this giant head, but then it's changed and it looks normal on the physical model. The answer to that is nothing's changed. So it's an illusion. So we have to make the head big. We have to make the feet big. We have to make the fingers big. We have to make the blades a little thick, because when you're looking at it on a render on your monitor, it looks great, but it's also a little oversized. So when you start shrinking it down, for whatever reason, those pieces seem to disappear the quickest. If you have these big sausage hands, and mine are a perfect example because they are, as it shrinks down, as it gets further away, they start to disappear. They start to get smaller. Now, when my hand's back here, it doesn't look like I have big sausage fingers. But, if they're up here, now it looks like I have big sausage fingers. So it's the same way with a digital sculpt. When you're looking at it on a screen like this, but then you shrink it down to 32 millimeters, now all of a sudden this hand looks fine. But if my hand keeps going back, now my fingers are just little toothpicks. Hands, feet, heads, and weapons more than anything. We have to make them oversized. So what you see on the screen is actually what you see on the 32 millimeter or 35 millimeter model. I think it actually started back in the 80s, before there were 3D programs, because I love miniatures. And then eventually I caught up to the technology, or maybe the technology caught up to me, but we were able to start making miniatures on the computer. And as soon as I saw that, I knew that's what I wanted to do. Jumped in. I was working on a degree in animation. I saw that 3D printing was becoming a thing, and I was still messing around with miniatures 30 years later. So it seemed like the right path, and the stars aligned, and I've been working with Privateer as a full-time digital sculptor for nearly 8 years. So Gen Con models are a special thing for me. We do a RAM model every year. It's available at the con. There's merchandise that comes along with it. It's kind of like a prestige model. This will be my 8th Gen Con, and I've been fortunate enough to work on 6 of the last 8 Gen Con models. So this year's Gen Con model is an alternate Marauder for the Eternus Continuum. It's the coolest faction in Warcaster, and it's normally available at our booth at Gen Con. So this year we had to change things up a little bit. So if you want to check her out and add her to your Eternus Continuum battles, I strongly encourage it. Hey, this is Doug Hamilton, Privateer Press digital sculptor. Thanks for hanging out at Gen Con with me. We'll see you next year.